Yes. Hello, everybody. Welcome, latecomers. Welcome, people just standing outside the door. Now's a good time to come in. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for coming along. So, as by now you're no doubt aware, we're celebrating 25 years of PEDro. If that's not what you're here for, you're in the wrong room. So yeah, this is at the Physiotherapy Evidence Database, which started in 1999. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the lands of the Gadigal people from the Eora Nation. Also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and the various lands on which we work and live. And I pay my respects to elders past, present, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal people and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters. So my name's Steve Camper. That's a photo of me, what I used to look like. Now I look like this with a jacket. Just by way of a little bit of housekeeping. So we have some people online joining us. You can, if you wish to contribute, you can in the chat. This session is being recorded. Please put your phones on silent, but the people in the room have them ready because we're going to have some fun and games later. I think that's all. Cool. Good. All right. If anything goes wrong, Lexi's really driving this. All right, so we've got a very, very packed program, and so we're going to go through things pretty fast. So put your seatbelts on, and let's get into it. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that we do have people from overseas joining us today. We have people from the Netherlands, from Turkey. We have Queenslanders in China, and we have people from Dubbo as well, apparently. So that's fun. People from China and people who aren't Queenslanders from China as well. All right. So, wave, yes? No, they've gone. All right. So, we're going with a video, I believe.
So I'm an avid PEDro user. So I've used PEDro as a clinician, but also as an academic and as a researcher. So I think PEDro is important because I think it helps me to locate the high quality evidence in a shorter time. Then that would of course influence the what I teach and also influence the treatments that are being delivered.
Community is really important, and physiotherapists form a great community. So I'm sure many people will kind of get it when I say you always know somebody somewhere. So we have a great community of practitioners, and I think that's the first thing I like about PEDro. It's, you know, focused in to our community, and it's selecting evidence that's appropriate to our community.
We're awash with all kinds of dodgy journals out there. So to have a trusted resource to go to where you can reliably access knowledge around what is the evidence, what is reliable evidence for this condition, I think is absolutely critical. But actually to have an independent body that's not got vested interest to say, hey, what is the evidence for this? That's so important for us as a profession, and for clinicians to go, I can trust this as a source of reliable, accurate knowledge.
Nice, huh? Yeah, so I think what strikes me looking at something like that is just how big PEDro has become and how influential it is today, and I think that's something that it is really a lot of credit on, particularly the people who got it up and running in the first place, and I think it's just amazing. Speaking of that history, here's a little bit more of it.
At one stage in the School of Physiotherapy at the University of Sydney, lecturers were given the opportunity to run elective subjects, and I ran one on using clinical trials to make clinical decisions. The assignment for it required that students go and find 3 clinical trials on a question of their interest and critically appraise them. So over the period of several years, I accrued several hundred randomised trials. So I remember talking to Kathy about it, and we thought, oh, this is a pretty valuable resource. We could do something with this, and we put our heads together and we decided that there's this new thing called the internet, and we might put it on the internet, and we put it on a PC in the lab, and got PEDro up and running.
I think I realised when I travelled, because I could be in places in South America and people wouldn't know who I was. But once you mentioned PEDro, their eyes would light up and things would warm. And so, yeah, I guess I realised at that point in time we'd created something which had global recognition, which is pretty extraordinary. And so that was probably within 5 or so years of developing PEDro. So it's amazing that you could reach all these different parts of the world so quickly.
I really realised we were onto a good thing when 2 organisations really helped us, the Australian Physiotherapy Association and also the Motor Accidents Authority of New South Wales. And they provided seed funding for us to get started, which was really pivotal. But more importantly, they provided some recurrent funding, and the Australian Physiotherapy Association is still an important funder of PEDro. And it was their vision for wanting to improve patient outcomes and not having to get something out of it, like it was the philanthropic doing something good for physiotherapy in New South Wales, Australia and the world, that they really invested in it.
I think for me the most mind-blowing thing was when Anne started working out how to actually record the statistics from the website. And then we really realised, how many countries around the world were actually using PEDro and the absolute number of users.
We started off having 50 concurrent users, and so now there's a new search initiated every 10 seconds, and it's used across the globe. So, for example, in countries that are experiencing quite a lot of hardship at the moment, like the Ukraine, physiotherapists are still using PEDro to guide practice. And so hopefully we're influencing the quality of care in countries that are really struggling because of other issues.
Many physiotherapists won't realise that as recently as the 1990s, really there was very little research going on in physiotherapy. I think PEDro had a role in turning that around and making people look specifically at evidence of the effectiveness of interventions rather than just at the mechanisms or hypothesised mechanisms behind things.
My proudest moment with PEDro was when I was awarded the Mildred Elston Award by the then World Confederation for Physical Therapy in 2019. And I received the award because of my contribution to physiotherapy because of PEDro. And I feel like I was hogging the limelight there because the real star of the show was PEDro. PEDro winning this amazing, prestigious award was a great validation of the importance of PEDro globally.
To me, another factor in the kind of global engagement is the number of different languages that the website has been translated into. And that's, again, Anne's hard work with making connections from people all around the world to, volunteer to actually translate elements of the website.
Yeah, and for us, that's an international expression of people's goodwill and their enthusiasm and altruism.
I think to me, the most amazing feedback has been when we've attended the World Physiotherapy Congresses, and we hold stalls on PEDro at those congresses, and the number of people who genuinely come up from countries all around the world and talk about how they've contributed to PEDro or how they're using PEDro, and how PEDro makes a difference in their practice is quite mind-blowing.
Well, the challenge is that we've got an exponential growth in research, which in one way is good, but it then makes the cost of running PEDro quite high and growing exponentially each year, which you would understand. And so I think that is the challenge. We have to look to technology to provide the solution to that challenge. Obviously we can't turn off research. That'd be a pretty silly way to solve the problem. So really we've got to get a technological solution so that we can archive and synthesize and make available the evidence. And so it's on that side of the equation that we need to get something happening.
I think there's something, if I use invoke my MC's privilege just with a reflection on PEDro, and there's, for those of you who have had anything to do with the research world, there's something sort of intensely individualistic and competitive about research and being a researcher. And the other thing that's changed over time is that we're starting to be pushed as researchers to demonstrate impact, and to see that PEDro is something which started 25 years ago, and impact has always been the central mission of that. So it's really something, an initiative that sort of, even before, as a research community, we were thinking about how do we do things together, how do we focus on impact. PEDro's been doing that, and I think really it's again a massive credit to the vision of those people that started that up that are with us today. Thank you. All right, so next up we've got Dr. Chia Yamato. So she's going to talk for exactly 4 minutes. Here is a research fellow at the University of Sydney.
So hello everyone. Where am I? So today I'll talk a little bit about the resource that PEDro has been developed over the last 25 years. And I thought it would be nice to start talking a little bit about the physiotherapy as a profession. And so we all know the challenge that we face to implement evidence-based practice, but we also know that the patient outcome and the success of an intervention really depends on that. So aiming to inform physiotherapy practice, PEDro has lots of different resources that are very important and very interesting. So for today's presentation, I decided to share some key milestones with you, but of course PEDro offers much more, and you can always check on the website. So the first one that I would like to talk is a little bit about the database itself. The database is really the backbone of PEDro, and it's like the library for evidence, physiotherapy evidence. At the beginning was just a pile of printed articles, as Rob said, but today we have more than 63,000 trials, systematic reviews, and guidelines. And PEDro reach is huge in terms of how it has been used over the globe. And so PEDro is assessed for more than 215 countries with more than 10,000 daily searches, and as Anne said, with one search every 7 or 10 seconds. The second milestone that I would say is the PEDro scale, which I think is like a report card for research. And if the database is the library, then the PEDro scale is kind of the librarian. So it ensures that you find the best research. And the third milestone that I would say, it's all the training program and all the different campaigns and video tutorials that PEDro provides. But I choose two to be mentioned here today. So the first one is the PEDro Tackle Barriers campaign that was created to hear about physios' complaints on how to use evidence-based practice, but also to provide some insights on how to break down those barriers. And the second one is the PEDro training scale, the PEDro scale training, which teaches you how to assess physiotherapy trials for methodological quality. And the last one, but not least, is the Worldwide Journal Club. So the Journal Club was launched in 2020, and it has been a great success, generating discussions around latest research on a certain field. And so key studies addressing gaps in evidence are selected, and then discussion is generating to explore how we can implement those insights to improve care. And so if you're not familiar with that, or if you want to join, you can simply scan the QR code on the screen. And so PEDro has been changing the future of physiotherapy, impacting physiotherapy practice globally. And I just would like to show you some examples of this. I think the first one that we saw before is the internationalization. So today, PEDro speaks 17 languages, and this means that physiotherapists all around the world can find evidence-based resource in their native language. And this may sound a bit trivial, but we should probably remember that language is one of the biggest barriers to access and use evidence-based practice. So I think this is really a huge achievement. The second one is the evidence in your inbox. And so this is probably the easiest way to keep you updated. And PEDro can send you all the new evidence on a specific area of your choice. And the last one, but again, not least, is the newsletter. So the newsletter brings information on the latest development and research. And for those resources, if you are interested to know more about it, or if you want to subscribe, those QR codes can take you to the subscription page. So to finish today, I just would like to say that from those 5 very smart people, I think today we are a huge community. And more than a PEDro collaborator that I realized I've been for 10 years, I'm here today maybe as a Brazilian physiotherapist that recognize how PEDro has changed the profession and the professionals in my country over the last 25 years. So it's just amazing to see how PEDro provides resources that are really vital for better clinical practice. So I just would like to thank you and to ask for us all to continue holding hands and keep PEDro alive.
Thank you, Chair. All right. So the next person we have speaking is one of those people who was responsible for getting PEDro up and running. So Mark Elkins is co-director of PEDro, and he has affiliations at the University of Sydney and Sydney Local Health District. Go for it, Mark.
Thank you. So if you go to the resources tab on the PEDro homepage, you will see a number of papers published by the PEDro team categorized under these headings. So some of them are to do with evidence-based practice, some are to do with the content of PEDro, some are to do with the usage of PEDro or the PEDro scale, and so on. People often like to see how these things accumulate over time, so I made this animation. in the beginning, it was mainly looking at the whole content of PEDro or a few papers on evidence-based practice. There was one on core physiotherapy journals and one on the PEDro scale. And then pretty quickly after that, we got into randomized trials and randomized trial quality. We looked a bit at systematic reviews, and then by then we were having papers on data and so on. And so this is kind of where things ended up. This is how much evidence has accumulated under each of these categories. People often like to see these animations more than once, so I'll just let it run again. I won't say as much this time, but just to point out that things accumulated very slowly for about the first 8 or 10 years, and then it was after that point that things really took off. Okay, so as I said, things accumulated very slowly initially and then they got faster. So I just want to point out a few papers from along this timeline, not necessarily the most important, but just a few key ones. So one is the very first paper that was published on PEDro by the instigators of the database. And this just described how the database worked and its content. And by a happy coincidence, the size of the database at that time was 1/25 of what it is now on its 25th birthday. The next paper that I want to talk about was this one by the same authors, which was published in response to when it was suggested that people go and read a trial, they responded that, that trials keep telling me that the interventions are ineffective. And so this paper showed that there was evidence for multiple interventions across multiple subdisciplines of physiotherapy where the treatment was effective. There's kind of a similar catch cry today when we recommend that maybe people go and read a Cochrane systematic review. They say, all Cochrane reviews say that the evidence is inconclusive. And I think back when the Cochrane Library first started, that was true, but gradually we are accumulating more evidence and reviews are gradually becoming more conclusive. A third paper that I want to talk about is this one, which has been cited over 5,000 times, and that's mainly because the PEDro scale is commonly used to rate the quality of included trials in an exponentially increasing number of systematic reviews, not just in physiotherapy now, but in medicine, nutrition, speech pathology, and so on. Probably a lot of the papers that are on that page of the PEDro website are what you might call grumpy report card papers, feedback to the profession to say that the methods or the reporting of a particular type of study is not as good as it could be. One of the gratifying things, though, is that when we go back and look at how things have changed over time, we often see that things are improving, probably partly because of the report card paper, partly because of reporting guidelines, partly because your paper gets knocked back by a journal if the protocol wasn't registered, and so on. But in any case, things are improving, and so that's a good thing. And sometimes these papers spawn an initiative within the profession. So this paper looked at the use of 95% confidence intervals in the reporting of randomized trials. And one of the nice things about using PEDro as the content as the fodder for your analysis is that because we've shown that it is so comprehensive in its indexing, we can say that a random sample is a representative sample. And so this paper caused a lot of discussion among physiotherapy journal editors, and we got speakers in to talk to us about the issue, and we came up with a joint recommendation that we published in multiple journals encouraging people to use confidence intervals. And we have seen an improvement over time in the proportion of trials reporting confidence intervals. So just to finish, if you wanted to do a study using the content of PEDro as the fodder for that study, then please email me and I'll send you a template to guide us in drawing off the right data for you that you will need for your project. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I guess, and speaking to the point of impact that I mentioned before, I guess it's a really nice example of how the work that's been done by the people in the in PEDro is really changing the way that research works in physiotherapy in really positive directions. All right, now we're going to have some fun. There's some questions coming up. Can you get your phones out? There's a QR code about to appear. There's some questions about PEDro that are going to come up that Lexi's going to put up. And Lexi just told me before that there's a prize for the person who gets the most correct. Is that right, Lexi?
Yes.
All right, good. First question. We're going to go through these pretty quickly, so it skates on. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The answer. How come all right, next question. What year was the Diagnostic Test Accuracy Database DETA launched? You get from 4 now. 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, Lexi. About a third of people. I wonder if that's the same third of people. Okay, next question. What's the oldest RCT listed on PEDro? Is it older than the directors? All right, only 3 now. 3, 2, 1. Probably older than most of them. All right, next question. What does the rho stand for in PEDro? Closing up in 3, 2, 1. Same percentage, isn't it? You're going to be giving out a lot of prizes or not very many, aren't you? All right, how many total views do the PEDro YouTube videos have? Three, 2, 1. Next one. Whose office did PEDro data live in before it went online? Of course, in the days when there were offices. Closing up in 3, 2, 1. What are the top 4 barriers to EBP highlighted in the PEDro Tackles Barriers campaign? Yeah, this one was on Cheer's slides. Better get this right, Cheer. 3, 2, 1. Get it right? Yeah. Which of these logos was not found in the PEDro archives?
You'll have to check your phone for this one.
Tough. Well, it's probably B then. All right, 3, 2, 1. All right. The number of published articles on the Medline database that mention PEDro, PEDro scale, PEDro score, or physiotherapy database in the title or abstract. 3, 2, 1. All right, how do volunteers help with PEDro? Three, 2, 1. Good. How are we going, Alexia? That's done. All right. So we have another video now.
The training was great. It was easy to follow. It took me through each of the steps in a time that suited me, and I was able to do it from the comfort of my own home.
It was self-paced, so I could pause and repeat content as much as I liked at any time. There was also support from the PEDro team if I had any queries throughout the training.
I could do it from where I live in rural South Australia, I could do it from the city. Being a PEDro grader is a really great way to improve my understanding of research and really sustain and build on how these papers apply to my patients. Being a PEDro grader has been a really rewarding way to contribute to the physiotherapy research profession.
Everyone has the potential to be a PEDro reviewer. I recommend all of my HDR students become involved as PEDro reviewers, and I've even had some undergraduate students get involved too.
So next I'd like to call Simone Dorsch up. Simone is an Associate Professor at the Australian Catholic University.
So I was asked to talk about why PEDro is important in the real world. And I think we all know that clinicians are incredibly time poor and usually short-staffed and just very busy. But I think what we can't underestimate is the immediacy of providing healthcare. And if that is your everyday job and you're faced with people that have difficulty breathing or can't walk or people who are in pain, that really overrides everything else. But at the same time, physios want to help people make choices about their healthcare and they want to provide. I'm going to talk about a couple of examples from the EBP success stories. And one of them comes from Rohit, who's a new graduate physio, and he was asked to see a woman in her 60s who had been through horrendous cancer treatment and just had a hysterectomy. And she was obviously very reluctant, feeling very fatigued and unwell. And Rohit was wondering what on earth he could do to help her to realize there was a role. So he used PEDro to access, as people do, the latest evidence and also knowing what was high quality evidence, and shared that with her. And it changed her approach. The ability that to use PEDro to help form people's voices about evidence. The second example is some physios from Toowoomba Hospital in Queensland using the resources that are provided on the PEDro website to change the way that they ran their balance class to make it the most effective balance class it could be, using the information provided about what is evidence-based practice in this area. And here we have Maddie Jaeger, a physio there, and she talks about the success of that class and how people doing the class with the changes that they had implemented to make it more evidence-based meant that it was having an enormous impact on people's balance outcomes, and the measures were showing changes such that we know that makes a big safety in the and helping people achieve the goals that they want to achieve in their lives. So I think we know that clinicians work under incredible pressure and work in very difficult situations, and PEDro can travel alongside them within those settings and help them have access not just to the evidence, but also access to knowing the quality of the evidence that they're accessing, and PEDro also provides them with the resources to help them with the implementation of that evidence-based care, and that's why PEDro is critical in the real world.
Thanks, Simone. I was interested to hear about real-world impacts. It always makes me question my choice of profession as a researcher. It makes me wonder where I live. We're going to next go to Daniel Tracy. He's going to talk to us online. Daniel is a physiotherapy advisor for South East Sydney Local Health District. He's also the co-chair of New South Wales Physiotherapy Advisors Network, the chair of ACI Rehabilitation Network, and an inaugural member of the New South Wales Health Systems Advisory Council. He's a very busy man, clearly, and finished a PhD as well. Daniel, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you very much for the introduction. So in preparing for this talk, I was reflecting on the many physiotherapists who now work outside of the role as physiotherapists, but still within the health system. I know within New South Wales Health, we see physios now working as chief executives of LHDs, as general managers of major teaching hospitals, as the operations manager of a statewide telestroke service, as well as directors in many health government agencies, all able to use many of their fundamental physiotherapy skills of listening, problem solving, and finding the evidence. However, it's important not to forget the direct and long-lasting influence that so many frontline physiotherapists have within the health system. Today's clinicians constantly test, challenge, and develop their skills and abilities, allowing them to foster growth of both themselves and others around them. They're aware of the potential to learn from those around them, always displaying a sense of curiosity and gratitude, and in turn nurturing a positive and progressive learning culture. They are generous, willing to give their time and knowledge to support others, to stretch and grow in innovative ways to reach their potential and deliver evidence-based care. And today's physiotherapists formally commit to updating their skills and always looking for ways to inspire others. Over many years, we've seen the scope and role of physiotherapists rapidly expand, influencing the care that clients receive in the health setting. A really early example of this was the role that physiotherapists played within the emergency setting. And in more recent times, we've seen the influence of physiotherapists developing prehab programs to improve patients' journey through the surgery. And we've now seen physiotherapists working alongside medical specialists in areas such as orthopedics, neurosurgery, and women's health to be able to deliver non-surgical approaches just as effective as some of the surgical approaches to deliver care and really improve the individual's lives. During the COVID pandemic, we saw physiotherapists working at all ends of the pandemic, from within the ICU playing a key role in saving people's lives, all the way through to running long COVID clinics and restoring function to people's lives. Increasingly, we're seeing the role and influence that physiotherapists play alongside technology. The use of virtual fracture clinics, remote monitoring, and online exercise platforms now allow patients to receive the same care within their home or work environment that they previously would have needed to visit a hospital or a clinic for. This just highlighting another example of the physiotherapist taking a leadership in developing initiative programs, elevating the human experience, and really shaping the future healthcare delivery across both the state and the world. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. We're going to move on next to Rick Dawson, Dr. Rick Dawson. Sorry, Rick. And look, I think it's really important, as I was mentioned earlier, the APA, that Anne mentioned, I think, in the video, I think without that initial support and ongoing support, PEDro wouldn't be where it is today. Rick.
Such a big photo of me, so let's move on, shall we? So I'm here on behalf of the Australian Physiotherapy Association, and I speak on behalf of all the leaders of the APA over the last 25. I think Fiona McKinnon was the APA president in 1999 that was a principal supporter of the concept of PEDro, right to myself next year as the incoming president of the APA. I've just got back from the World Physio Conference, the Asia West Pacific in Bali. I've been on a cultural immersion, and I can see where PEDro has made such a difference in us understanding research and looking towards 2025 and the need to develop our Reconciliation Action Plan. We see PEDro as a vital resource to supporting us in closing the gap. The APA has a career pathway, and we want to support physiotherapists from their postgraduate professional development, right from their, as we heard before, new graduates in their year one, right through to the specialisation process with the Australian College of Physiotherapy. And we see our profession as an evidence-based profession, and we think PEDro is crucial for us physios to access and implement research so we can make a difference with the patients' lives. We recently supported PEDro in developing the Level 3 evidence-based physiotherapy practice course to aid physiotherapists on their path to titling and specialisation. And it's a course that features short online lectures and resources to help our members identify quality research and using it for clinical decisions. And the APA encourages all our career pathway candidates to become PEDro raters, as we believe that this supports our candidates in understanding what quality research is and is a key to their future career success. We know that PEDro has supported many specialist physiotherapists to achieve their success. We've also used PEDro from an advocacy point of view. As you can see on this slide, we've developed many clinical guidelines and advocacy reports, and we couldn't have done this without PEDro and their ability to get access to our team and develop these guidelines to influence the future of the physiotherapy. So we just want to say we have been a principal supporter of PEDro and we will continue to be one. So just to sum up, we've got a few APA members online, and I just want to reach out to a few of them. We have the Vice President of the Australian College of Physiotherapists, Dr. Jen McClashen, who is a specialist women's, men's and pelvic health physio. We've also got Tamara Rowan, who's the head of the college, and we've also got Janine Fleming, who is one of the key workers under the Physiotherapy Research Foundation, and all of them have been great supporters of PEDro. So we just want to say, on behalf of the APA, thank you, PEDro, for helping physiotherapy remain a quality quality health profession in our landscape. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. All right. So the next speaker is going to be by video, and this Professor Marco Pang.
I'm Marco Pang from Hong Kong, the chair of the World Physiotherapy Asia Western Pacific region. It's an honor for me to join the celebration of the 25th anniversary of PEDro. 25 years is certainly a very important milestone, and I'd like to congratulate the PEDro team for all the amazing work that you have done. PEDro has made tremendous contributions to the advancement of the physiotherapy profession by providing free and global access to the best physiotherapy evidence. During my time as the president, the Hong Kong Physiotherapy Association was always committed to making yearly contributions to support the work of PEDro. At a more personal level, I, as a researcher, and my research students use PEDro a lot in our day-to-day work. We really appreciate what PEDro has offered us. Once again, congratulations, and I certainly look forward to an even more successful 25 years ahead. Thank you. I'm Michael Peng from Hong Kong, the chair of the World Physiotherapy Asia Western Pacific region.
The next speaker is Professor Alice Jones, and Alice is joining us from China, and she is going to say hello briefly, I understand? Maybe she's just going to, oh yes.
Happy anniversary. From Beijing Sports
Thank you.
University, we are.
Thank you, Alice. So Alice has recorded a video, and so.
Oh.
Good afternoon. My name is Alice Jones. I'm very privileged to be given this opportunity to celebrate the 25th anniversary of PEDro with you all. I still remember my first meeting with Professor Rob Herbert when he and his team visited the Hong Kong Polytechnic University over 20 years ago. Well, I can say quite categorically that anyone wanting to be involved in rehabilitation research and practice, PEDro is the must go-to site. PEDro is far more than our search engine. The way that PEDro ranks the quality of scientific reports results in improved accuracy and efficiency of data analysis. And in countries such as China, where the skills in physiotherapy research is still at an early developmental stage, PEDro highlights the importance of the conduct and clear recording of a randomization process. Working with colleagues in China, it is quite clear that the impact of PEDro on research in China has been huge. Through public seminars run by Professors Rob Herbert, Anne Mosley, and Mark Elkins, PEDro is now known to many professionals in China. To be fair, however, there are many users in China that are still unaware of the way to how to optimize the use of PEDro and unaware of the fantastic tutorials and courses and resources available on the PEDro site. Many colleagues in China have expressed their wish for a more formal introduction to these auxiliary functions. With the advancing development of social communication media in China, I can easily envisage a mega online seminar run by PEDro, potentially benefiting hundreds and thousands of researchers in China. I look forward to more public educational seminars run by PEDro, and I believe this is an important step to raise the standard of research globally. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. All right. What we're going to run next is some Q&A and comments. So the idea here is if you have questions for any of the speakers today, we also have 4 of the original directors, Chris Maher, Kathy Sherrington, Anne Mosley, and Mark Elkins is online as well. So if you have questions for one of them, or you have questions for one of, is Rob online? Oh, sorry, Rob. Rob's online as well. Or if you have questions for one of our other speakers, Chia, Simone, Daniel, Rick, or Alice, fire away. So I think Lexi and Geraldine were going to run around with microphones. So if it asks to wait till a microphone comes to you so the people online can hear. Questions or comments? Yeah, good. Who wants to be brave enough to kick off? Jane.
Thanks so much, Stephen. I mean, what an impressive presentation, and so amazing to be sitting here in the room with and online with the 5 founders who actually I'm of a similar vintage, I'd have to say. And while I was sitting at my desk, they were changing the world. So, you know, congratulations on what you've done there. The impact across the world is amazing. And I'm really interested to understand what is the vision for PEDro for the next 25 years. I hear some great comments from you in China that you really could help amplify and accelerate the message of PEDro and therefore improve the level of education. But what are the real vision for what you have for the next 25 years? And I suppose I should address that to Geraldine, should I? As well as some insights from the founders.
Thank you, Jane, for that excellent question. Here's one we prepared earlier, coming on a little bit later. So as Chris said, really potential for AI. We're really keen to explore how that could help make the processes more efficient. We're also really keen for any suggestions and support from everyone here in the audience and online. We really do all need to put our heads together to work out different ways of funding PEDro, whether that's more donations, whether that's more advertising, whether that's more different organisations, and whether it's more volunteers helping out with aspects of PEDro.
Who's next?
Hi. I'm not going to ask a question. I'm just going to say a massive congratulations to everyone who's involved. Of course, the 5 founders, and mostly for all you've done, and congratulations to Geraldine for taking on the mantle. It really is a fantastic achievement and story, and of course you're so proud, and you should be, and I can see so much for the future with it as well. It's a great model. Well done.
Hi there. Great event, and it's Jenny Allison, and I think it's a wonderful, as I reiterate what everyone said. But what I was delighted to hear, Rick, is that the APA is going to continue to support PEDro, because I think all of us as members of the APA really value PEDro, and as we all pay our annual subscriptions, it's nice to know that some of that will go to support PEDro. I don't know what other international physiotherapy groups do support PEDro, but I just think that it's maybe something we could talk to and see. And Alice, I mean, lovely to see you, Alice, in China, as you often are. But I think that's another great space for PEDro to be supported, because there's a huge amount of interest in research in the Chinese physiotherapy groups. But I've been there with you, and I know that there's a hunger for these kind of things. So I think that was another opportunity. But it'd be interesting to know what other associations are supporting PEDro and how we can encourage that. Yeah. So congratulations, everyone, though. That's really what I wanted to say. It's stunning. And I grew up with these people too, although I'm a little bit older, but it's phenomenal what you've done. So thank you.
Just a quick reflection. When you talk to developing countries and other physio associations across the world, COVID's had a big impact on their sustainability, and as a result, their ability to donate is really difficult, even their ability to contribute to the World Physio Association. I know this is a very an issue that PEDro needs to think clearly about, and the APA has their back, but we do need a lot of other associations, not just supporting PEDro from in-kind, but we need their financial contributions to support PEDro's sustainability into the future.
First world countries. Sorry, Rick, but what about the first world countries that use PEDro?
They need to consider what they can do as well moving forward.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for that. Just one thing, so one of the two countries that physio is not used in is North Korea, and so we're always looking for volunteers, for people who want to be an ambassador to North Korea. So if there's anyone who'd like that, please, come as first. All right, so we'll move on. We're not going to have another Slido because Lexi's run out of prizes. The next person up is Kathy Sherrington, and she's going to talk about some future considerations.
Pleased to be joined by Geraldine Wallbank, the PEDro manager, who many of you have probably come across. It's my job really to thank everybody who's contributed to PEDro thus far. So the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy is actually also donating enough to be a higher level partner. And all these other organisations have actually contributed over the time to PEDro. And we're very grateful also to the University of Sydney, the Sydney Local Health District for in-kind support, and also to Neura. So Rob Herbert was at Neura, and now Kim Delbert, Professor Kim Delbert, who's here in the audience, has taken over the stewardship of PEDro within Neura, where PEDro is physically hosted, which we're extremely grateful for. And so this is just to give you a sense of the number of people who've been involved with rating PEDro. So these are our volunteer raters from this year. So incredible contribution, as you can see. And kudos also to Dr. Peter Stubbs for setting up the PEDro Raters Facebook group. So there's 94 members of this private Facebook group, and we're really trying to emphasise the community aspect of PEDro. So, please get involved. We have many collaborators, so recognising all the people involved with all those translations. The satellite centres. So we have established formal satellite centres in a number of countries and hoping to generate more, and acknowledging also Anne Mosley for the initiative there in setting those up initially. We also have a number of PEDro champions in Australia, so from different universities in Australia, and we're hoping to make that initiative international as well. So we have a number of committees, so our current steering committee, education training committee, also incredible contributions, various other working parties, advisors, and incredible staff. So PEDro really is run on a shoestring. So we have around 2 FTE staff, and huge kudos to Geraldine for wrangling all that. And also wanted to acknowledge Courtney West, who really also goes above and beyond, and they both actually volunteer additional time from what we can afford to pay them. And Courtney put together all those videos that you saw earlier. So all done on a shoestring. And so then just going to pass to Geraldine to talk a little bit more about the future.
Thanks for your question in advance, Jane. And so when we think about future, we think about opportunity, think about possible creativity, we think about just what lies ahead. But as Chris mentioned in the founders video, what does stay the same is evidence and making good clinical decisions based on evidence. We have gone through the journey and looked at the global community that has been brought together with PEDro. And so the future really does need to be thinking about the global community. How can we harness networks within that to power PEDro on for the future? We've spoken about AI and the possibilities there and just the exciting possibilities there, but it isn't cost neutral. So we do really need to be thinking about what are some funding opportunities, grant opportunities. Perhaps the future also means it's a call to action to volunteer for people who haven't been able to at some point to perhaps volunteer at this point. We do need people to put their heads together to think about what piece is missing or what piece can they play in this whole operation. It could be that people will need to be still thinking about the physical work that needs to be done while we wait for the promise of AI. It could be that you might want to buy PEDro a coffee, a coffee a month. You might do that for a friend, and PEDro is more than your friend.
Just to really clarify, this is a campaign that we've got going where you can choose to donate to PEDro either as a one-off or as an ongoing donation. And really, if everyone who's listening to this was to donate $5 a month, that could make a massive difference.
This is just a summary of PEDro and the resources available. You might want to scan the QR code to consider ways you could help PEDro. There are lots of options there, and it will follow you up and just have further discussions. It's not a commitment right here and now, but we're really quite open to your suggestions and just practical ways to move forward.
I just wanted to thank everyone for coming along. It's fantastic to have so many people here in person and also online, and people who are going to watch this recording later on. Really has been an international effort, and particularly a regional effort. I would also like to thank all those involved with the event today, which really does take a village, and we're very grateful. Very, very smooth. So, yeah, thank you. Back to Professor Camper. Thank you.
Thanks, Geraldine and Kathy. So, the next thing we're going to do is just to note that we will be having a couple of more celebrations for our overseas partners, so one in the Americas and one in Europe, and they're the dates and times that they'll be happening. And this, I guess, really reflects what's been happening in PEDro and the organisational structure over the last 4 or 5 years, where things have really expanded, and it's very exciting, and it's great that we can share that celebration with our newer partners in different countries. All right. What we're going to do now is have everyone come down here for a photo. However, on your way, you'll see a QR code on the screen. I'd like you to open that up, and it is going to ask you, what's your favourite thing about PEDro? And so what we'd like you to do is type your favourite thing about PEDro in, and come down to the front, please, and we'll have a photo, and then we will release you to the drinks and canapes. And I will thank you very much for coming along, for your attention. Thank you for all the people online who joined us. Fortunately, you won't be in the photo. Yeah, thanks for coming, and it's been great to have everyone here. Cheers.
Right, just down the front, I think will work best. So, all the people down the back. Bring smart, stay where you are.
We met at how are you going? How's your PhD going?
And you can choose the input. Exactly.
Hello. Leanne really wants to see you. She missed you at your retirement. So yes. She goes, I'm really because I want to see Jenny again. I said she could be online. That's it.
I'll stand in a little bit more in the middle. Okay. And keep on kind of, if you can't see knee at the front, come forward, and then pull the knee back.
You should stand a little. Back in the back.
Yeah.
Get it right.
So guys, let's say 25 years old. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, did you get the people online? Oh, take one of them online.
Oh yeah, I got put on call. Sorry. Just hold it. I just want to review my work. Yes, I can.
No, like I might be hard to go back to the office, but the house. It's a good job you do.
Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah.
I say something.
I always come across the word before.
But now it's photograph.
What?
The girl from my country always ask you to take photo.
But he's got his girl
Not
now.
boy.
He's got your girl now.
You know what? He's a wise. That's why he's a wise man. And he knows how to make a multiple girlfriend. And he bought one, professional camera. That's smart trip. Let's go take a photo. I know lots of unmissable scenery in Beijing, China. Which city exactly you live in?
Yunzhou, near Shanghai.
Near Shanghai.
Population city. Yeah. At that place, a lot of
So is that again? What's
they're all option guys. They come very I think if you have time, please don't have people interview you to what is the real China.
Oh yes, oh thank
I do, right?